Scott Moe was first elected to the Saskatchewan legislature in the 2011 provincial election in the constituency of Roster and Shelburne. He was re-elected in 2016. He was elected leader of the Saskatchewan Party on January 27th, 2018, and sworn in as Premier of Saskatchewan on February 2nd, 2018. Premier Moe was born and raised on a grain farm between Shelburne and Parkside. He and his wife, Krista, currently reside nearby in Shelburne. He was educated at the University of Saskatchewan, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. He has previously served as Minister of the Environment, Minister of Advanced Education, Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Water Corporation, and Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. Premier Moe's priorities include a focus on increasing Saskatchewan's exports to create opportunities for people and further grow Saskatchewan's economy. To this end, he created the Ministry of Trade and Export Development with a mandate to sustain and develop relationships with Saskatchewan's current export customers and placed an increased emphasis on diversifying our markets worldwide. He has made it a priority to engage with current and prospective trading partners around the world to advocate for Saskatchewan's export industries. Saskatchewan supplies much-needed goods and commodities such as food, fuel, and fertilizer to over 150 countries. Premier Moe is also committed to advancing the economic interests of Saskatchewan through strengthening Saskatchewan's high-quality agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and energy industries that meet the needs of growing markets around the globe with the world-leading efficiency and sustainability. Thank you and welcome to the Battlefords, Premier Moe. I'd like next to introduce Mr. Tim McMillan. Tim? Tim grew up on a family farm north of Lashburn, near where the McMillan family first homesteaded more than a century ago. After receiving a degree in economics from the University of Victoria, Tim returned to the farm to raise cattle and start an oil field services company. This experience in the energy and agricultural industries, coupled with his background in economics, propelled his desire to seek a seat within the Saskatchewan legislature. In 2007, Tim was elected as a Saskatchewan Party MLA in the riding of Lloydminster. Tim held several strategic cabinet portfolios in the government of Saskatchewan, including Minister of Energy and Resources and Minister responsible for trade. In 2014, he left politics and was appointed President and CEO of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers in 2014 and served in that role for nearly 8 years. Today, Tim is consulting and living in Calgary with his wife, Allie, and high school-age daughters, Riley and Grace. Thank you, Tim. At this time, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Tim, and he is going to conduct the fireside chat with Premier Moe.
Thank you, Barrett. Is this, yeah.
The Premier
So
speaking.
thank you very much for the invite. Related to federal provincial responsibility and how we craft a path that makes sense for Saskatchewan. You brought a white paper out earlier today, Premier, and it talked about not just where we're at, but it went back and looked at the history of how Saskatchewan had to fight for the responsibility for our resources, that they were granted in the 1930s. And at several points since then, Saskatchewan has had to continue to defend those responsibilities. And we're in one of those cycles again. And maybe, Premier, I'd just ask you to make a few comments about kind of how you see the broader issue, as well as the white paper that you brought out this morning.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Tim. And it's great to be in North Battleford. Tim comes from just a little ways west, pardon me, of North Battleford. I come from a little ways east, still live there, and it's great to meet in the middle here in what has historically been a community and a city that has a very rich history in the formation of our province. A little bit of what we are going to talk about here today. And you're right, Tim, if you go back to the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, we ultimately started to come together as a nation. I think it was 1870 when Manitoba joined Confederation, Alberta and Saskatchewan, then in 1905. However, neither of those three provinces didn't actually have control over their natural resources at that point in time. And the white paper that we put out here just a couple of minutes ago really will go take a walk through time in our province and through the nation of Canada as well, as we led up to those dates. 1905, when Saskatchewan and Alberta joined. 1930, when we actually brought in the Natural Resource Transfer Act, and there was much discussion by many Liberal premiers, as it be through that period of time, on how we were sending our resources to Eastern Canada. And it ultimately culminated in the agreement that we had in 1930 that brought Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan into be a full partner for that period of time when it comes to sharing of our natural resource wealth with Canada, but also preserving the opportunity to keep some of that wealth and develop some of those projects here in our province. Step forward through to about 1982 when we actually succeeded, I guess, the British North American Act with the signing of our Confederation documents and our Constitution that we have here in Canada. And much of what we talk about historically brings us up to where we are today. Today in this nation, where we are very much having a similar conversation. And this isn't a conversation that's entirely focused on, the province of Saskatchewan or another province and the differences that they have with the federal government. It very much is a conversation about what we are able to achieve as a province. We are on the cusp of some very great things here in the province. I would say we are on the cusp of some of the greatest opportunities that have ever been presented to this province and ultimately to the communities that are here. Right here in North Battleford, when you look at the agricultural crop that we took off today, but you look at the grain hub that is forming right here in North Battleford to the north with 6 facilities there, facilities being built out to the east of this city. When you look at what's happening in the energy industry to the north and to the west of this city, it's monumental, and it's not happening like it is here anywhere else in the world. 2 months ago, we had put forward our methane reductions results, not the plan, but the results thus far for the energy industry in Saskatchewan. We have a 60% reduction in methane emissions in the energy industry in Saskatchewan. It's largely due to the investments that are happening right in this area of the province, and those investments are not happening anywhere else in the world to the level that they're achieving the results that we have here. And this place, just in and around North Battleford, Lloydminster area, is now producing some of the most sustainable heavy oil that you can find anywhere on Earth. And so this is where we are today, is we want to develop more of those resources. We want to develop more potash mines in Saskatchewan. We want to develop more uranium mines in Saskatchewan. We want to further develop the energy industry. We want to develop our agri-food industry. With that comes jobs. With that comes the growth of our communities. And with that ultimately comes our ability as a provincial government, as a municipal government, and actually as a federal government as well, to reinvest right back into the services that we look to governments to deliver to us and to our families. And so the white paper will walk through the historic relationship between provinces and the federal government. It'll walk through ultimately where we are today and the opportunity that lies before us. And then ultimately it's going to also walk through and put forward our direction on how we as a provincial government intend begin to unlock Saskatchewan's potential and really achieve what we see as being that opportunity that lies before not only the community of North Battleford, but every community across this great province that I have the opportunity to serve over the course of the past few years and today. Your MLAs that are here today, I'd like to re-acknowledge everyone that has joined us here today. I see our MP Rosemary Falk for this area here. Thank you, Rosemary, for coming. I see Jeremy Cockrell. They've handed me a list so I don't miss anyone. Ken Francis, pardon me. Terry Jensen, Colleen Young, Ryan Domitar have all joined us. Thank you. Mayors that have joined us. I think there's a Reeve in the room. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Lyle Stewart wasn't able to join us today. Part of the consultation in getting to this white paper and some of our direction was some of the work that Lyle Stewart and Alan Kirpin, former MLA in the province, have done throughout the summer. We combined that with what our MLAs have been conversing and bringing together in each of their respective ridings across the province. I myself conducted a number of town halls across Saskatchewan throughout this past summer, and the culmination of all of that consultation, all of your voices in communities right across Saskatchewan are coming in to this white paper, combined with, as I said, some of the historical context, combined with some of the challenges and opportunities that we see today, and we formulated all of that into some direction on where we're going to be going as a province of Saskatchewan to unlock our potential, at times to defend and protect our opportunity, but most certainly ensure that we're able to attain what lies before us.
Right. No, agree, Scott. I think the whole room would be full of people that recognize the opportunity before us. I know that you're itching to get to where do we go and what are the proactive steps that Saskatchewan can and will take coming out of this. But just before we get there, I am going to pull us back to kind of where we are now for some context. And we are a province who's responsible for our resources. We have a regulatory system that is built up to create some of the most responsible regulatory rules and performance. You spoke to the methane performance of the oil and gas industry. Our farmers are some of the best in the world at producing grains, oil seeds, and
they are the best.
They are the best. I stand corrected. And our mining, same thing. We are innovating, finding new and better ways to mine. That being said, in the current incursions from the federal government into provincial responsibility, it is often under the headline of environmental rules and regulations. And any specific areas that are concerning that are reflected here in the white paper on that file? Yeah,
and there is a number of areas, and really what we will see here, and I grabbed a piece because I do want to list off, there's really 9 policies that are entirely problematic for, and are locking in Saskatchewan's opportunities. We have, as you've seen, there's been about $15 billion of committed investment across the province. That's in the mining industry, it's in the energy industry, it's in the agri-food processing industry, the value-added agricultural industry, the fertilizer industry as well is announcing investment. And the exciting thing about having $15 billion announced over the course of the last 10 to 12 months in this province is there's more. There's more investment that's looking at this place. There's more investment, much more investments that's looking at very much this region of the province on how we can, add to what is happening in, yes, the energy industry, the agriculture industry, to ensure that we can provide that sustainable product to the world. Our agriculture, and this is on me to some degree. It won't be on me anymore. We have missed, in many cases, telling our story to not only our customers around the world, and I think we've gotten there, but telling our story to other Canadians and other fellow North Americans. As I said with the methane story, which is centered right in this area, some of the most sustainable heavy oil that is being shipped around the world is coming from this area of the world within 150 miles of North Battleford. You add to that in Saskatchewan, the enhanced oil recovery that's happening down in the Weyburn area. There we have the only North American net zero oil company that's operating right here in the province of Saskatchewan, and we're providing that to really provide continental energy security in North America, and also where we can, providing that energy to the world. Agriculture, we produce our agri-food products at a lower carbon content than anywhere else on earth. We most certainly can be thankful for the innovation and what Saskatchewan farmers have done in pioneering zero-till technology, pioneering GPS technology that is preventing overlap, allowing us to get into precision farming. We're at the very cutting edge, and in many cases leading the world on producing food more sustainably, and we have a lower content per ton of agri-food products that's being produced. When it comes to potash, and Saskatchewan very much is a global potash player, we produce our potash with a 50% lower carbon content than our competitors in other areas of the world. Most certainly, this needs to be recognized as we look ahead and look into the future, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we're ultimately going to do that. And we think there's going to be more investment in the sustainably produced energy industry here in Saskatchewan. We know there is. We know there's more investment available in the potash industry, in the uranium industry, in the agri-food sector to advance everything that we're doing. And those are our sources of wealth. Those export-based industries are where we get wealth from outside that is injected into our communities. What the challenge is there are 9 federal policies that when you look out and extrapolate what those federal policies will cost us between now and 2035, it amounts to about $121 billion, about $9.6 billion a year to the economy of the province of Saskatchewan is what these 9 policies will cost us. That's about $6,500 per year per person in the province. And we would say that there is a much better way for us to address sustainably produced products and ultimately use a carrot as opposed to a stick, to incentivize as opposed to disincentivize. The 9 policies, just for the record, are the federal carbon tax, the oil and gas methane mandate, the oil and gas emissions cap mandate, the fertilizer use mandate that's been talked about, the clean fuel regulations, the zero emissions vehicle mandate, the federal output-based pricing system, the agricultural methane mandate, and the landfill methane mandate. And that $9.6 billion is off of what we produce today. And I just talked about the cusp of how we're on the cusp of attracting all of this additional investment. We're actually going to have the opportunity to produce much more tomorrow and the next day and in the days ahead. And so that $9.6 billion, that $6,500 per person per year, is actually much larger than that if it's stymieing any of this investment that is coming into some of the most sustainably produced products available that are produced right here in Saskatchewan. And so for us, what we have done and what the title of the document that we have here today is Drawing the Line in Defending Saskatchewan's Autonomy. It's really about defending Saskatchewan's opportunity. It's defending our jobs and pioneering a way for us to be able to ultimately have more jobs in our community, have more of an opportunity for that next generation. And at the end of the day, it's about what then we can do as a municipal government that is doing well, representing a growing and prosperous community, a provincial government that is doing well, representing a growing and prosperous Canada, not nation, prosperous province, pardon me, and we firmly believe that when we have strong communities in Saskatchewan, that makes for a stronger province. We firmly believe that when we have a stronger province of Saskatchewan, it makes for a much stronger confederation and a much stronger nation of Canada. And so this isn't about what the federal government is doing. It isn't about Saskatchewan picking fights with the federal government. It's about Saskatchewan people and us working our level best to provide Saskatchewan people with an opportunity to achieve and to attain what we know is possible in the days ahead. And here are some of the challenges. There's others, but these are the ones that we've highlighted in this paper, and these are the ones that we're going to focus on in the days ahead on leading as opposed to following. Taking the initiative to step out as opposed to reacting to someone else's initiative at a different level, per se.
And this has been a fairly consistent approach of your government, and I know that the Saskatchewan Party had a resolution at their last convention that started leading down this path. Alan Kirpan, who is here today, and Lyle Stewart, on your request, toured the province and met with people around Saskatchewan. The frustration, and I would say even at times the anger, is real. That whether it is a lack of understanding that is driving some of this. Some of the narrative coming out of central Canada, out of Ottawa, is almost offensive. It's very limiting to our economies, and as you noted, the numbers are stark. Telling farmers that there's a move to reduce fertilizer by substantial amounts, it's affecting livelihoods. So it is anger. It isn't just frustration. It is actually seeing the manifestation of these policies, which will be very damaging. What have you been hearing, and what did you hear back from Lyle and Alan from their tour this summer?
Well, Lyle and Alan, and thank you, Alan, for volunteering your time to come out and travel the province with Lyle Stewart, our previous Minister of Agriculture, someone you served with as well, Tim. All right, thank you to our MLAs in the room and those that aren't here as well for the reaching out in your various constituencies that you did to people that have spoken to you about some of the challenges that we have and some of the opportunities that we are maybe at times nervous that we're not going to be able to attract into our regions of the province. And then, as you said, this conversation has been around for a number of years, but it's very much been a conversation of the federal government will do something, and then we will react. We'll take them to court. We'll take them to the Supreme Court. A bunch of provinces will pile in, and we're very reactionary in what we have been doing. That changes, and that's ultimately, I think, the theme of what we heard throughout this summer is we understand that there's some challenges at the federal policy level, but what are we doing as a province to really determine our own destiny? What are we doing as a province to ensure that we're not missing on the opportunities that lie before us in our respective region? And there are tremendous opportunities that are being presented to region after region across the province, and so that would, I think, was to be the overarching theme. We heard, various, and there's some quotes in the document, and I would encourage everyone to have a look at the white paper that we put out here today, and across the province. I would encourage everyone. There are a number of quotes in there, but we also heard statements that we, for example, you need to be more like Quebec. You need to be like Quebec when it comes to immigration policy, taking more control in prioritizing the numbers of immigrants and who those immigrants are, and for example, what training they might have and how they're going to fit in to various communities and various parts of the economy in our province. Quebec has had some additional control for a number of years. Our immigration minister, Jeremy Harrison, who hails from just north of here in the community of Meadow Lake, has already put forward a document to the federal government saying that we do want to increase Saskatchewan's influence on where our immigrants are coming from. First of all, we want more in numbers. 2, we want more influence on the approval process, and 3, we will work ultimately with other provinces and wherever these folks are coming from to ensure that they have access to training and whatever it might be to be to be participating members of our community and ultimately our economy and our society. As we find our way through the list of concerns on how can you be more proactive versus reactive. I spoke earlier about all of our industries and just how well they're doing from a sustainable production perspective, agriculture, potash, and the energy industry. And what we really need to do is look at how can we provide the companies that are operating here, all companies, the opportunity to actually monetize some of the investments that they've made. Those investments haven't been made in other areas of the world, but they've been made here, and most importantly for us, they've been made in Saskatchewan. We need to set up a framework so that these companies can actually participate very quickly in the voluntary carbon credit market, for example, around the world, and thereby allow all sorts of companies around the world to actually achieve steps towards a net zero conversation or a net zero level. WestJet, Walmart, all these companies are looking for this, and we have many companies, Monsanto, CNH, that do a lot of business in this province. They all want to find their way to net zero. We actually have the avenue to do that. And so we're working quite closely and have been for some time on how can we set up this voluntary carbon credit market, actually allow companies that are making those investments to sell those credits to other companies, allowing them to find their way to net zero, and really put some structure to some of the conversation that, you know, many others are having, but maybe aren't putting the actual structure to actually attain the results that we need to, and incentivize. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can incentivize these investments, monetize some of those investments, you know, grain companies, canola crush facilities, energy companies are going to look very differently at the investments ultimately that they are making. You know, where this leads us as we look ahead, the Constitution is very clear. There are areas of shared jurisdiction with the federal government, environment being one of them. There are areas of sole jurisdiction of the federal government, transportation, pipeline conversations are one of those. And there are areas of very much sole jurisdiction for the provinces. The development of our natural resources is one of those. Those areas, from time to time over the course of the last now 100+ years, have been blurred by various federal and provincial governments and the conversations that they're ultimately having back and forth that have at times evolved into disagreements. But at the end of the day, the Constitution is a good document for Canada. If I had a magic pen, I'd change it in a few places, but it is a good document for all Canadians, and it ultimately is one that we respect as a provincial government in Saskatchewan. That being said, good fences make good neighbors, and there is a time for us to reaffirm what is and what isn't in the Constitution from our perspective, and if someone is to move into a different laneway or a different realm under the Constitution, we can also set up ultimately what that process might be for rectification of that. And so we will, and you will quite likely see, I'm almost certain, going to see some legislation come this fall to really reassert Saskatchewan's place and how this province operates under the Constitution, all the while respecting the Constitution, which is the document by which this nation was found, the document ultimately that we are a signatory of in 1982. But we will be putting it into the House legislation this fall that is going to really reaffirm where the provincial jurisdiction is as per the Constitution of Canada. And as I said, we firmly believe that this will enable and help Saskatchewan. It will help us unlock what we view as Saskatchewan's potential. And if we believe that a strong Saskatchewan makes for a strong Canada, this will be a positive piece of legislation for the people of this province.
And for the people of the country, I think.
Yes.
Like you say, good fences make good neighbors on both sides. You've been working on this for a while, and it's started with meeting with people, policy at your convention, white paper has been prepared and now delivered, and potentially legislation later on this fall. Alberta has just had a new leader elected who is being sworn in as Premier today, I believe, Danielle Smith. Yeah. And she, in her leadership, talked about a piece of legislation called the Sovereignty Act. Do you think there's room to collaborate? Do you think she's looking at some of the same issues, or any comments you might have about how Alberta and Saskatchewan line up here?
Yeah, so there is no act in Alberta at this point, and I think there's been recent communication that any act that would be formulated in Alberta would ultimately would respect the constitution of the land and the laws and the courts of the land, which is important. For sure, I think there is an opportunity for us to collaborate, not only with Alberta, and I would suspect as we move through to this fall, they'll be looking closely at some of the work that we are doing here in Saskatchewan, and we will work closely with Alberta, but there'll be other provinces that will be looking at this as well. As I said, if we firmly believe that good fences do make good neighbors, there's no reason at all that other provinces also won't be looking at can we reaffirm our provincial constitutional authority as well to ensure that we also are not missing out on opportunities that might lie before us. And I mentioned 9 policies that are of concern to us in Saskatchewan. You'll notice that that didn't include the Bill C-69, which was the pipelines bill that has, or the Impact Assessment Act, pardon me, that has actually been ruled unconstitutional at the Court of Appeal in Alberta. I didn't include the Tanker Act. I didn't include, ultimately, the Clean Electricity Standard that is being talked about and mused about now, which would add to those costs directly. The Clean Electricity Standard has now gone forward to discussing that not only would coal be phased out by 2030, but all fossil fuel electrical generation would be phased out by 2035. Well, if you think of the North Battleford Power Station or the Queen Elizabeth Power Station in Saskatoon, that makes us in this community, and me just living that way, I believe, a little ways, quite cold in the winter if we're not going to allow our natural gas facilities to operate past 2035. The impacts are direct in many cases, but they're indirect as well in many cases. When the now deemed unconstitutional Impact Assessment Act, which was deemed unconstitutional in Alberta, is a challenge for the energy industry. And you hear about pipelines, and you'll hear me talk about pipelines. Some of those pipelines don't actually have Saskatchewan oil in them, so they directly aren't of impact to Saskatchewan. But indirectly, they take oil away from other areas of Alberta and will free up some capacity in pipelines that we do have access to. They also, when oil, and Tim, you have spent the last decade on this discussion, they also, when you have constricted capacity to get your oil out through pipeline, it will end up on the rails. It'll end up on the rails heading down to the Gulf Coast and to the West Coast. And that has a tremendous impact on the capacity that we have on the rails for potash and agricultural products. And we've had many challenges with both of those products over the course of the last few years. We have a larger discussion than just pipelines that needs to happen in this nation. And it is about how are we ultimately going to get all of the products that we're going to produce, and we're going to produce more of them, and they're going to be higher value here in Saskatchewan. How are we going to get this increased number of products to a saltwater port, ultimately so that we can deliver to the world in the years ahead? This is a challenge. This is, I would say, as we look ahead 5, 7, and 10 years, is likely going to be the #1 challenge that will be constricting our opportunity to grow in the years ahead. So we have an immediate challenge right here, but I think down the way we need to open up a much larger discussion about how are we moving products back and forth across this nation of Canada, around our continent of North America, and ultimately providing those products to a port facility where they can be provided to the world. And on that, when it comes to energy and food security, can I digress for a moment? Please. When it comes to energy and food security, it's important for us to really refocus that conversation on not only Canadian energy security, and food security is connected to that, but North American energy and food security. If we're not going to have a very serious conversation, long-term conversation about how we're going to ensure that we're energy secure on this continent, who else in the world do you think is going to have it for us? And if you want to draw a parallel on what happens when you go down a path of talking about strictly and solely emissions in the environment, without allowing the energy security piece to come into that conversation, you need to look no further than Europe today, specifically Germany. There is a tremendous challenge that, unfortunately, is on full display for the world to see, that when you adopt policies like these 9 policies that have been put in, or being in the process of being put in by the federal government, and how you are going to lower the emissions in your respective country, thereby pushing those emissions, because you're still going to buy the products. 1/3 of the oil, coal, and natural gas in the European Union come from Russia today, and have for the last decade. 65% of the natural gas coming into Germany comes from Russia. That is what happens when you solely consider these policy initiatives without allowing the conversation around, are we energy secure in our nation or on our continent in our case? And we should not in any way be backing away from what we are producing here, how we are producing it. We should be yelling from the rooftops that it's some of the most sustainable product available in the world. We should be incentivizing the companies that are investing and doing business here to do even better tomorrow, and they will, and they are doing that, and they are making those investments, and we need to incentivize even more. But we most certainly should not be trying to push our emissions offshore, outside the nation of Canada, offshore our continent. We should be taking care of ourselves in North America, and ultimately then playing our part in providing energy and food to the world. So to answer your question, yes, we'll work with Alberta and likely other provinces.
I think that the frustration that I spoke of earlier certainly is felt in this room, and you certainly can reflect that very well. It's very problematic to see our friends and allies in Europe facing a devastating winter in front of them, having the German Chancellor come to Canada and ask our Prime Minister to enable LNG facilities to be built on our East Coast.
So he asked for LNG, didn't get it, we got hydrogen. He was in the United Arab Emirates 10 days later, and he signed a deal for LNG with the United Arab Emirates. So that's what he was here for.
Yeah. And in the interim, Europe is going to burn more coal this winter than maybe any time in the last decade. Yeah. And Canada is sitting on hundreds of years of natural gas, oil that we could be supplying to our allies.
Where we are on that, so we have oil and we're cleaning that up as we go along. And I mentioned what's happening here and what's happening in the south. We have food, fuel, and fertilizer, right? But we have everything that people need today: oil, natural gas. We have coal for the south, but we're transitioning, and we're cleaning up those products as we transition. We'll get to the carbon credit system that we'll put in place, which will actually give our customers around the world the opportunity to look at our products and say, well, it's pretty high quality, it's affordably priced, oh, and it has a lower carbon content. I'm going to buy that rather than this, whether it's potash, food, or oil, and we're getting to that. Where we're going is actually quite interesting in Saskatchewan as well, as we clean up those resources and transition, as we expand our uranium industry and provide that product for clean nuclear power around the world, and quite likely have the opportunity to use it here in this province with SMRs, and ultimately should be providing even more of that. We power today 1 in 20 homes in the US, and that should be climbing if we want to have this continental energy security discussion. And last but not least, and I would ask everyone to keep their eye on what's happening as we convert to electric vehicles, battery power in the rare earth elements sector. There's one critical minerals processing facility being constructed in Canada, and if not, it's 1 or 2 or 3 in North America, and that's in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, by the Saskatchewan Research Council. So if where we are is burning oil and gas today, where we're going is quite likely some oil and gas, more nuclear, some renewables, yes. And where we're ultimately heading is to some degree of battery power. Saskatchewan lines up very, very well today, tomorrow, and far into the future. And so we shouldn't for a minute think that the opportunities that we should be discussing about and that are landing here in this province, investment, jobs, ultimately the end opportunity is the ability to reinvest in services for our families, safety, education, healthcare. We should never think that those opportunities aren't real, and that we are on the cusp of actually receiving more of that investment than we ever have before. Sorry I interrupted.
No, I think that Saskatchewan is well positioned for the world today and where it seems to be going, and just such an exciting time. As we're getting down to the last few minutes, I think I'm going to hand it back to Derek, and if there's a couple questions from the audience, the Premier has generously offered to answer those. So Derek, I'll let you moderate this.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Premier Moe. We just asked kindly, we're going to have a short question and answer period. Could we just ask questions that are in line with today's theme? We all probably have 10 questions we'd like to ask Premier Moe. Let's keep it strictly to what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes here. Anybody that has a question, please raise your hand and we'll try and get to you. Yes, Mr. Billis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moe, for coming to the Welcome Fest. We'll be talking to your subject matter about the mass
I think there's more of an opportunity actually for it to even go more granular to that is as we continue to attract investment into our provinces. It's those companies ultimately then that are going to provide the natural gas, in this case, natural gas to a country like Germany. And so, you know, as we grow as a province and become a hub, and Alberta very much so is there in the energy industry, us less so in the energy industry, but very much there when it comes to agricultural commodities and potash and uranium as well. We're a globally respected power when it comes to those products, not only because we have them, but because of how we ethically and sustainably produce them. And that's something we can be very proud of in this province. We also produce close to 500 million barrels of oil as well, which is no small amount. So it even gets more granular than the provinces. But what does need to happen, and always needs to happen, is they need the support of the federal and the provincial government as we find our way through those, whether they be memorandum of understandings or indications of support, whatever that might be. It does need the support of the I would say all levels of government, federal, provincial, and even down to the municipal level. When I spoke earlier of, you know, the longer term challenge that we're going to have in getting our products to export markets within our continental North America, but also to export markets to position it for offshore to go to other countries around the world. That takes tremendous coordination between first the federal government, then the provincial governments, and then ultimately municipal and regional governments as well. And there needs to be a benefit for everybody involved. The people where, for example, a rail line goes through, or a pipeline, or a highway, or where an airport is located. We need to have that collaboration up and down the chain in order for it to work well. If it wasn't that way, we wouldn't have a railway. The railway really is the first significant, well, you could go before that, the boats on the rivers. You know, when people came into this country, they came in on the river system. Then you saw the communities actually move to where the railway stations were. And now we see going even beyond that to where the highways are, and actually even to where airports are. All of that has to happen with coordination up and down the chain. So federal, provincial, municipal, regional leaders, First Nations leaders, and then ultimately to have companies that are willing to invest into that environment, doing business in that environment, hiring and allowing for careers to be in those communities, and they're the ones ultimately that will conduct the business. We don't sell oil as a province. The Emirates has a little different situation with their oil company there.
Thank you, Premier Moe. Mr. Caldwell.
Yeah, most certainly, and we heard that, Alan and Lyle heard that often this summer, is why can't you act more like Quebec? And I would say the first piece with acting more like Quebec is to take the initiative, to step out and just start doing things like up to and including unilaterally changing the Constitution, which they just did here this past year, which the Prime Minister and the federal government has said is okay. They're going to allow them to do that. And so I think that actually does open up some opportunities for provinces like Saskatchewan to have a real look at, you know, are there some items similar to what Quebec has done, up to and including unilaterally changing the Constitution. The immigration agreement that Quebec has had with Canada, it's called the Canada-Quebec Accord, allows Quebec much more flexibility in selecting which immigrants are coming to the province of Quebec. For different reasons, we want that same flexibility, and that document is actually sitting on the federal minister's desk, and it's the topic of discussion at the federal, provincial, territorial ministers' meetings, the last one and throughout this year. And so there is some space, and I wouldn't preclude that there will be additional space where if we have to reaffirm our province's right to develop our natural resources, including agricultural land through the use of fertilizer, including our oil and gas industry, including our mining industries, including our ability to generate economically clean power here in the province. We won't preclude taking additional steps even beyond what you're going to see us take this fall.
Thank you, Premier Moe. Shannon Reichert.
How is the provincial government deal with
That is a challenge. Absolutely, it's a challenge. This is a, you know, I was at an environment ministers meeting a number of years ago where that was just post a premier's meeting, a first minister's meeting, where the premiers and the prime minister met in Vancouver, where they signed the Vancouver Declaration. There they all agreed to work together on 4 points. One of those was ultimately a carbon tax or pricing of carbon. The next meeting was the environment ministers meeting, where we were told that the federal government is just going to move into this space. If you don't, we'll be there. So they wanted to backstop it, as opposed to working with the provinces in a collaborative way in an area that is ultimately shared jurisdiction. They also promised at that point in time they wouldn't go above $50 a ton. Quickly, they're up to $170 a ton in that space. And so the goalposts have been moving, not once in a while. They've been moving frequently. Very frequently. And that has been an ongoing challenge for not only the 9 policies that I mentioned and where they started, but ultimately where they end. And that's why you see when there's discussion papers that are put out and policies initiatives that are put forward, like the 30% in fertilizer reduction. And then it's shifted to an emission reduction because there's some public pressure. But there's some real circumspect, given how some of the policies have come forward, where they're actually going to land at the end of the day, and how they're going to change in the years ahead. And if we all think back to when my predecessor, someone we both served with, when the introduction of the carbon tax, which was the canary in the coal mine for all of these others. But when it was brought in, our former Premier Brad Wall had said, has anyone done the economic analysis of these policies? And no one had. And that's what we're doing. Part of this process is what we're doing for Saskatchewan right now. And that cost at existing levels of production is $121 billion out to 2035, $9.6 billion a year to the province, $6,500 to each and every one of you in this room and everyone else in the province. That's if we don't, and that's not including any foregone opportunity that is coming down the pipe. We have the opportunity, I think, we already are producing some of the most sustainable food and fuel and fertilizer in the world. And what I would like to do is to be an example around the world on why you should invest here, why you should expand on the technology and innovation that we have operating in these industries. And then we can ultimately provide that product to Canada, to North America first, and then ultimately to the rest of the world. It's the cleanest in the world. It's competitively priced, as I said. It's some of the highest quality product in the world. And most certainly what we're going to do is start taking the initiative to put things in place, put parameters in place like the carbon content of our products so that our customers can ultimately see that. What we need to do, I think, as a provincial government as well is tell a better, a more concise story to our fellow Canadians, and I would say even to our fellow folks across North America. The energy security discussion is not one that should be discounted in any way right now. In particular, while we watch what is happening in the European Union this winter, in particular when you consider that for the last decade plus, they have been buying the largest portion of their products from Russia, and in particular when you think what Russia has been doing with the profits from those sales.
Scott, can I just add a quick comment on that? I think Germany is a great example of a nation that may not have been open to Saskatchewan's message up until about a year and a half ago. And the realities have proven that they are now ready to hear that message. And I'm afraid that parts of Canada may see costs at a level that change their perspectives and openness to a Saskatchewan message as well.
You can ignore reality. You cannot ignore the consequences of reality. The consequences of reality, unfortunate as it is, are going to land in the European Union. They're already landing in Ukraine. They're going to land in the European Union this winter.
Okay, the last question, I think we're going to give the floor to the Mayor of Battleford, Mr. Ames Leslie.
Thank you. Recently at an economic environment forum in Vancouver, and we were discounting, denying the value of carbon insets, which come from our agricultural products, wheat, barley, etc. If the provincial government looks at their own carbon platform, would you guys be considering looking at the value of their agriculture offsets or oil?
Yes. Yeah, what we're looking at is a framework largely where aggregators can go out and aggregate voluntary carbon credits for our industries. We're starting with agriculture, we're starting with energy, we're starting with our mining industry. We'll expand it to wherever we can. The government's work will be to put in place some regulations that allow for it to happen. And then the industries will go to work. And the industries are very, very well versed on what their carbon content is, where they have made investments to change that. What we are going to make every attempt to do is provide the opportunity for our industries to monetize investments that they've already made, zero-till fertilizer placement. The engines in all of our equipment are far different than they were 10, 15 years ago, but also to ensure that they can monetize and account for future investments as well, that all of our companies are making here. Listen, as I said, this isn't a province and federal government. This is a province looking at what we can actually look like, our communities in 5 and 10 and even 20 years down the road. We have the plan for growth out to 2030. We've already are in I'll call it, threatening to achieve some of the targets that we have put forward in that document. We may have to alter it, but we are on the cusp of greatness in Saskatchewan. We have folks from all over the world that are looking to invest into these very industries because of how we produce the product and the quality of product that we produce, and how we are working with them as a provincial government. And what we are going to ensure that we do as a province is we are going to assert ourselves and be assertive in ensuring that we don't do anything to forego this opportunity, and we're asking anyone else involved to respect what we're doing as a province, to work with us as opposed to against us, to incentivize as opposed to demonize in many cases.
Thank you, Premier Moe. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our formal part of today. There's just a few things we have to talk about before we let you get back to your businesses, back to work. If anybody has questions that may not have got answered during today, our MLA, Jeremy Cockrell, is going to stick around after. He's more than willing to answer your questions. So if you have any inquiries, please contact or come and see Jeremy. Some thank yous to wrap up the day. Thank you, Premier Moe, for choosing the Battlefords on such an important day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim McMillan, for hosting our fire shot. Very, very important to have someone who's doing all this here. Thank you. Thank all the MLAs in attendance. This is at the point where I get to say that I made a couple of mistakes. I failed to mention a couple of dignitaries in the crowd, and I apologize for that. Chief Wayne Smagnus from Lillipine, and Reeve Dan Barco. Welcome, and I apologize for missing you in my opening introductions. Thank you to all media sources that came out today. Thank you to Jay Bottomley, Lillican Charlie's for the complimentary water. Gold Eagle Lodge for hauling over a couple of comfy chairs for these gentlemen. Thank you, Leah Garvin from the City of North Battleford, for letting us use this beautiful venue. Stacy, again, thank you for the great lunch,
And the pumpkin pie.
And the pumpkin pie, yes. Linda and the chamber staff, along with Jeremy, didn't throw this together because we don't throw things together, but meticulously planned this event in less than a week, which during over a long weekend is a little hard to do. Finding a venue, Linda, staff, Jeremy, awesome job. Thank you very much. And finally, you're probably tired of listening to me. Thank you for all attending today. Events like this don't happen without you buying the tickets, sitting your butts in the seats, and supporting the chamber. So thank you. Have a great day in business.
All right. Any questions?
So you covered a lot of material there.
Yeah.
Would you be able to just give us a couple of examples of concrete things that you're going to be doing this fall?
Well, as we look into the fall, what we're really looking to do is to take some steps with respect to our immigration policy to ensure that we are, bringing folks into this province that are not only fitting in with our economy, but ensuring that they have, a warm and welcoming home in our community. And the provincial level has been identified as much as Quebec does, is much more suited to, to taking a stronger hand when it comes to immigration selection. We're going to be moving on a voluntary carbon credit system, offset system here in the province to provide our ag industries, to provide our energy industry, to provide our mining industries, as well as many other industries, the opportunity to monetize some of the investments in sustainability that they have already made, and we have some of the strongest investments and results when it comes to sustainably produced products right here in this area of North Battleford with the thermal sites that have reduced methane emissions by 60%, the net zero oil company that's operating in the Weyburn-Mydale area, the sustainable agri-food products that we provide as sustainable as anywhere in the world, right from this province, and as well recognizing that, for example, in the potash industry, we produce our potash with about half the carbon emissions of anywhere else on Earth. And so that would be an example of where we are moving to attract investment, but to provide that regulatory certainty for companies that are operating here and provide them the opportunity to monetize some of the investments that they've made. And ultimately, we're going to be looking at legislation that is going to defend and protect the opportunity that we have to expand our jobs, to expand the size of our communities, and ultimately expand our province.
What would that legislation look like?
Well, I can't precurse legislation that ultimately be introduced in the Legislative Assembly, but most certainly what that legislation is going to do is going to reassert our provincial rights under the Canadian Constitution. It will be within the Canadian Constitution as we respect the Constitution that we have in this nation, but most certainly is going to reassert the provincial jurisdiction that we have, and ultimately provide us that opportunity and that certainty in this province to move forward, expanding some of the most sustainably producing industries on Earth.
Will it look similar to Danielle Smith's?
Have you seen her legislation?
I haven't.
No, mine neither.
Will it be in the same kind of...
I don't know what hers is going to look like. Listen, and my understanding is that they're looking at ensuring that theirs would be in compliance with the Constitution as well as ours most certainly is. Listen, we'll collaborate with Alberta, likely be collaborating with other provinces as well as we finalize what we ultimately are going to introduce in our Saskatchewan legislature. But listen, all of the moves that we are taking from here, up to and including reaffirming our constitutional rights as a province, are about Saskatchewan, and they're about the opportunity that we have in this province to grow and prosper, to attract investment, and ultimately to reinvest back into our communities in the services that, from a provincial perspective, our health care and education and community and family safety, ensuring that we have the supports but also the law enforcement in place to keep families safe in Saskatchewan. And so this is entirely Saskatchewan, the province of Saskatchewan focused, entirely, a province of Saskatchewan focused initiative, and the legislation will be like that. But we will work with other provinces as well, should they have a piece of legislation that we could look at prior to us moving, or if they want to collaborate with what we are ultimately working on.
Are you prepared to open up the Constitution?
The Constitution, there's various ways that you can open it. We did open up and change the Constitution once this past year, as we had found ourselves in a lawsuit where there was some changes that were required to the Saskatchewan Act. To change the Constitution, although it doesn't happen often, it can happen from time to time, and we did change the Saskatchewan Act in the Constitution this past year. Quebec has put forward some changes that they would like to see. We've been looking at those changes very closely, but ultimately, if we were to move on that front, you guys would be the first to know about it.
Is that include keeping profits in Saskatchewan as well, like not transferring money to the federal government, or ultimately, or what do you mean by protecting,
Well, what we're seeing, and I highlighted 9 environmental policies predominantly that are ultimately between now and 2035 costing the province of Saskatchewan, and I had my number mistaken, it's $111 billion, not 121. So $111 billion to this province. That's multiple thousands of dollars each and every year to each resident of the province, and that's based on, where we're operating today in our mining sector, in our energy sector, in our agriculture sector. And I would put forward, as we look ahead in Saskatchewan 5 and 10 and 15 years, that we are going to operate at a much larger level than we even are today, as we see investment coming into the canola crush sector. We see investment in grain terminals in this area. We see investment in the mining sector, significant investment in the mining sector, with quite likely more to come in the months and years ahead. And so Saskatchewan is on the cusp of a great opportunity, and we most certainly are going to reaffirm and reassert our provincial jurisdiction under the Constitution as it is, and we're not going to allow another level of government to infringe on provincial jurisdictions, such as developing our natural resources using environmental policy to do so, at an ultimate cost to Saskatchewan residents today and a very large cost to Saskatchewan residents tomorrow. And I think it's particularly challenging for Saskatchewan residents and other Canadians to swallow when we are already producing some of the most sustainable resources, in many cases the most sustainable resources that are available on Earth.
I want you to be clear on emissions. Like, should Saskatchewan be emitting more? Is that what you're arguing?
No, what I'm saying is what Saskatchewan has been focused on and will continue to be focused on is being one of the lowest emitters of carbon per unit of product that we ultimately provide to the world, which is the conversation that we really need to happen. If we're using X number of tons of potash in the world, what we are putting forward is Saskatchewan's potash is produced at about a 50% greenhouse gas emissions ratio to a ton of potash that's produced in Belarus or Russia, for example. You should buy Saskatchewan's potash not only because it's competitively priced, not only because it's high quality, but because it has half the emissions in that ton. And so as we use X number of tons, you can actually have less emissions from the industry, the global industry as a whole, by buying Saskatchewan tons of potash. And if we truly believe, and we do, that climate change is a global challenge, it's not one that is exclusive to Saskatchewan, and we're not going to push our emissions out to other areas of the world where they're higher. They're in nations, quite frankly, that don't have the ethical production practices that we have, and ultimately isn't good for our residents, isn't good for the environment, and isn't good, quite frankly, for the residents in that area of the world either.
If our production goes up, our emissions will go up.
But global emissions could ultimately go down, would ultimately go down.
Right, but you're okay with us emitting more than...
Well, this is so you're striking on exactly the challenge that I'd spoken about with respect to the European Union, where they're pushing emissions through their policies out of the borders of their country. In doing so, they're still using the product. They're still using oil and gas to heat their homes and to, in the case of Germany, natural gas to produce a number of crop protection products that are being sent to Canada and to North America. And so they're still using the product, but rather than producing that product within the borders of Germany or the European Union, they're buying it from Russia. And now what they have found themselves in the situation of a place of tremendous energy insecurity because there is global developments that have created some strain between the European Union and Russia, and Germany doesn't have the capacity, or the European Union doesn't have the capacity to create or to produce their own natural gas, their own coal, and their own oil, of which they are still using. And so they're looking for other places in the world to procure those products. I would say they should look to Canada. In fact, the German Chancellor was here just a few weeks ago asking Canada if we had LNG supplies that we could provide to Germany. There would have to be some shifts in our flows and some changes in federal policy in order for that to happen, but I would put forward that it could happen and could still happen.
You said this is not about picking a fight with the federal federal government, but all the policies you mentioned are federal mandates. So how is that not picking a fight?
No, we're not, most certainly not picking a fight. We didn't introduce any of these policies. The federal government did. What we are trying to do is to, continue to incentivize more sustainable production of our products in this province, and we're doing so through our provincial policies. We didn't introduce any of the 9 policies that are costing Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan GDP, about $111 billion a year. That's a larger number than we invest each and every year in healthcare and education combined. To put this in perspective, annually. And so we didn't put these policies in place. They are a challenge for us to achieve the opportunity that we see that lies before us. That's why we are going to be stepping in and leading, asserting ourselves, ensuring that the intent of the Constitution for the provinces to be able to develop their natural resources most certainly is going to hold true. And we're going to defend and protect the opportunities for jobs, the opportunities for families in communities just like North Battleford, right across this province, to every degree that we can. And that is what you have seen today, is a foundational document, a white paper, that provides some contextual history of the Constitution in our nation, how and where the provincial jurisdiction is, and then ultimately you will see steps in the days and weeks ahead on how we're going to ensure that provincial jurisdiction is recognized.
But aren't you escalating this fight by doing this? I know you're saying you're not starting it, but aren't you escalating?
Well, most certainly we're going to defend and protect the opportunity that we have. We've seen $15 billion of announced investment here in the province today. We would say that there is much more that can arrive here, and that is a good thing. It's a good thing for Saskatchewan people. If you believe that a strong Saskatchewan makes for a strong Canada, it's a good thing for all Canadians. It's a good thing for the environment, because this is where, if we're producing the most sustainable food, fuel, and fertilizer in the world, this is where we should be investing in expanding that production, and not investing in areas where they're producing it with a much higher carbon footprint than we are in this province. And that's true. In virtually every case, that is true.
You didn't include Bill C-69, the tanker ban, the electrical standard, in your policies. Why did you include them?
I suppose we could. They're going through the formulative stages. Well, the Bill C-69 has been ruled as unconstitutional by the Alberta Supreme Court. We'll be intervening in that, and we'd expect that would hold. The Alberta Court of Appeal. It'll be headed, I suspect, the federal government has indicated they'll bring it to the Supreme Court of Canada. We intervened at Alberta. We'll be intervening at the Supreme Court as well, and we feel that ruling will hold up, and that bill ultimately will have to go back for some reevaluation and some further collaboration with industry and ultimately the provincial counterparts. The clean electricity standard is still in its formation and discussion, but it is challenging. When you look at the clean electricity standard and some of the discussion points with respect to eliminating or banning fossil fuel power generation by the year 2035, that makes this community of North Battleford as well as Saskatoon very, very cold. Both are powered by natural gas today. Both will be powered by natural gas in 2035. And it's just another example of a policy where there's been no economic analysis done, and really no check-in with what is the actual reality of the situation and what is going to work as we move forward here in this province or anywhere else in Canada for that matter. Tremendous challenges with that kind of a discussion in the Atlantic provinces as well.
To say the average Joe at home is kind of like, why should Saskatchewan distance itself from the federal government? What would you say? What's your one message and why you want it?
Opportunity that this province has, an opportunity that Saskatchewan people have. And that opportunity ultimately, yes, does arrive with, A, investment, B, with jobs in your community, C, with people moving into your community so that you have a growing and vibrant community. But for us as a provincial government, where that opportunity actually, where the focus is at the end of that entire sentence. Then it provides us with a strong fiscal bottom line so that we can actually make decisions about investing back into healthcare, like we did with our Health Human Resource Initiative, in getting our healthcare system up and operating at a level that is expected by Saskatchewan residents as quickly as possible. And I would say that the investment in the Health Human Resource Plan we have in this province is unparalleled in this nation. But for another example would be to invest in our education system, not just in new buildings like we were in Carrot River celebrating a couple of weeks ago, but also investing right into our classrooms with a $50 million increase this year, up over $2 billion now in operational funding, which is just a number. But what it means is another teacher in a classroom. What it means is another educational assistant in a school. And what it means is some stability to our to the education sector where our kids are going each and every day.
Critics of Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act has been it could harm investment into Alberta. What can you say to people that what you're doing today will be certain and not provide a sense of uncertainty in this province?
It will most certainly provide certainty, and it's precisely what we are attempting to do and will be achieving this fall, is to provide the certainty of the intent of the Constitution of Canada. That certainty of where provincial jurisdiction is and where federal jurisdiction is, and what occurs when that line is blurred, most certainly is what businesses investing in our communities in this province are looking for. It's what workers that are working in those industries ultimately are looking for. And so our entire search here is to provide as much certainty as possible, given the uncertainty of these 9 policies and many more that are being discussed at the federal level. One of the questions from the floor today was, how do you deal with the moving goalposts? So not only do we have the policies that are being introduced, but then they are changed as we go along. For example, a promise and a commitment made by the former Environment Minister to never raise the carbon tax beyond $50. Quickly, that moves to $170. Those are moving goalposts that provide uncertainty for investment, not just in Saskatchewan, but across Canada. What we are doing is providing certainty under the intent of the Constitution for folks that are investing here, for folks that are working here, for folks that are living here, so that we can achieve what we know we can achieve in this province and ultimately reinvest back into education and healthcare and community safety.
The opposition leader says you've been stirring up division by doing this, and it's not for people, but it's for yourself. I just want to get your reaction to that.
It's only about the people. It's only about the people and the opportunity that Saskatchewan people have and can have over the course of today and into the future. We are on the cusp of such opportunity in this province. I would suggest that the leader of the opposition actually join this government, support our direction on this, and if she isn't, ultimately there's only one other laneway, and that is where the federal NDP are in supporting the coalition government and supporting these 9 policies and many more that are actually locking in Saskatchewan's opportunity. What we're trying to do is unlock Saskatchewan's opportunity, and disappointed that the provincial NDP wouldn't join with us in unlocking what we know can occur here.
And on the flip side, why not just invoke the notwithstanding clause? Do stuff like this
doesn't apply. Doesn't apply here.
And can you explain why it doesn't?
Well, legally it doesn't apply. Legally it didn't apply in the case of the carbon tax. Legally it doesn't apply in this situation. And so I need a lawyer to give you the details on why that is. Ultimately, we've been working through consulting with Saskatchewan residents, not only throughout this summer, but over the course of the past number of years, and coinciding, where our challenges are with where our opportunities are, and how do we find our way through some of these challenges. And you had said it earlier, providing as much certainty as possible is really what people are looking for in this province, and what industries are looking for to invest in this province, and what is really going to unlock our opportunity to be all that we can. Some of these policies are locking that opportunity in. We want to unlock that opportunity with as much certainty as possible.
So were you considering doing the notwithstanding clause, but then lawyers like you can't do it? Like, where is it?
Well, I don't think it's ever under consideration, because as you find your way through this conversation, there's things like that just aren't part of that conversation because they don't apply.
And on carbon credits, I know you're looking into that, but there's the argument that doesn't reduce emissions, it only offsets emissions. What's your reaction to that?
It's the whole net zero conversation, which Canada will not achieve net zero without Saskatchewan's participation in a large way. We're stepping into this way. Again, it really speaks to, a strong Saskatchewan does support, most certainly, and helps in an outsized way to make for a stronger nation of Canada and a stronger confederation. Canada will not achieve net zero without the participation of Saskatchewan. When you look at the sequestration opportunities that we have already have and aspire to in the future in this province through zero-till technology, through CCS, through maybe changing our forestry habits just a little bit to increase the sequestration that's occurring there. When you look at the innovation that in this area of the province in the energy industry that has already reduced since 2015 methane emissions by 60%. No other energy industry in the world, no other industry in the world, I would put forward, has a record of reducing methane emissions in 7 years by 60%. The Saskatchewan oil industry does. North America doesn't have another net zero oil company operating. Saskatchewan does, in Whitecap, operating with their enhanced oil recovery. We have a very strong record when it comes to the environment, a very strong record when it comes to investing in innovation that's reducing emissions. And now what we are going to do is ensure that our Saskatchewan companies that are operating here have an avenue to monetize not only existing investment, but have an avenue to be certain and monetize future investment as well, which is really, I think, where we need to get to as a nation, is to incentivize companies, industries, really to invest in lower emission technology rather than trying to penalize them if they shouldn't.
Sorry, last one for me. I just wanted to challenge you on the fertilizer emission thing. The federal government has said it's not mandated to reduce fertilizer use.
They also said the carbon tax would stay at $50. I mean, this is where it's a very, very challenging discussion when it comes to the federal government. And the question again came from the floor. The goalposts continue to move, and that is a problem. It's a problem for certainty for industries. It's a problem for industries that are looking to invest in lower emissions technology, is they don't know where those goalposts are even today, and they don't know where they're going to be tomorrow. And so what we are doing here today is really staking out our provincial claim of jurisdiction, saying that, you know, we think in Saskatchewan that we have so much to aspire to, and we're going to ensure that we're going to provide as much certainty for our industries and our communities to be able to achieve that.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.